Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, we're diving deep into cloud policy and governance. We're going beyond the basics, though.
Yeah, it's a lot more than just, spend less on the cloud. It's about strategy.
Exactly. It's about making sure your cloud aligns with your business goals, not just cutting costs. So, no need to rehash the definitions. Our listeners are savvy.
Right, they get it.
What I'm curious about is, what are the less obvious wins of having a really strong cloud policy and governance setup? What are the things people might not see right away?
Well, the source material actually digs into this idea that it can actually boost innovation.
Oh, interesting. I wouldn't have put those two together right away. Cost cutting and innovation. How so?
It's like this. When your cloud policies are clear and your governance is efficient, it frees up your teams. They can focus on the cool stuff, new products, better services, even exploring new markets.
Makes sense. They're not wasting time on things they shouldn't have to worry about.
Exactly. It's all about removing obstacles so they can move faster.
So less tripping, more running.
Exactly. And there are some great examples in the material of companies who saw this firsthand. Their innovations sped up big time after getting serious about cloud policy and governance.
So it's not just about working hard, it's about working smart, right?
Yeah.
But what does this look like in practice? What kind of policies are we talking about?
It totally depends on the organization, their goals, all that. But let's say a company wants to make sure that 80% of their compute costs are covered by those discounted pricing plans their cloud provider offers. That's a policy aimed right at saving money.
Yeah, bulk discounts, reserved instances, that kind of thing.
Exactly. But here's where it gets interesting. Let's say they mostly use AWS, right? They got savings plans, reserved instances, a whole bunch of options. A really good policy wouldn't just say 80%. It would lay out exactly how to choose the right kind of discount, based on how predictable their workloads are, how much they actually use things, even the risk of getting locked in with one vendor.
So it's got to be tailored to their specific needs, not just a one-size-fits-all thing.
Right, and this is where governance comes in. How do you make sure people are actually following these super specific policies?
Because having a rule on paper is one thing. Actually getting people to follow it, that's the trick, right?
For sure. And it's not about punishing people. It's about giving them the right tools, the training, the support. They need to be able to make good decisions that fit into the overall cloud strategy.
So instead of just don't spend too much, you're giving them the guidance to understand how to optimize.
And that's where you start to see the shift, right? Going from basic cost cutting to a more mature way of doing FinOps.
That feels like a good segue to talk about those different stages of FinOps maturity, that crawl, walk, run thing. But instead of just putting labels on things, maybe we could explore how a company's approach to this stuff changes as they get better at FinOps. What are the big shifts you see?
One of the biggest is going from doing everything by hand to using automation. Early on, it might be people tracking costs, finding places to save, enforcing the rules, all manually.
Like organizing your kitchen drawers by hand instead of getting one of those fancy drawer dividers. Gets the job done.
Totally. But as they mature, they bring in tools, technology to make it smoother. We're talking cloud management platforms to see spending in real time, systems that flag anything unusual, even policies written as code to automatically enforce the rules.
Wow, so instead of going through receipts one by one, it's like having an app categorize your spending for you.
Exactly. And that level of automation doesn't just save time, it cuts down on mistakes. And you can enforce those policies across the board consistently. Huge for getting things done right and getting them done efficiently.
So that move to automation, that's like a sign that they're not just walking anymore, they're really hitting their stride with FinOps.
For sure. And remember how we were talking about innovation before? Well, when you automate these important but time-consuming tasks, you're freeing people up to focus on the stuff that really grows the business, the innovative stuff.
So it's not just about speed, it's about focusing on what matters, doing the right things better, not just doing things faster.
Exactly. And that actually brings us to another really important part of all this, collaboration. As organizations get better at FinOps, they realize it's not just on one team, like IT or finance. It's got to be everyone working together.
This feels like a good place to pause for now. We've covered a lot of ground, the why, the what of cloud policy and governance, and we've even started to dig into the how with automation and the importance of everyone being on the same page. So we were talking about how important collaboration becomes as companies get more, advanced with their FinOps. It's not just one person's job anymore, right?
Definitely not. This is where things go from everyone doing their own thing to everyone working together. Think about it. Developers, they're the ones actually choosing the cloud services, setting them up, Finance, they need to see where the money's going to make sure it fits the budget. And the people at the top, they need to know how all this cloud stuff actually affects the business, right?
Yeah, it's like all the pieces have to work together, or else the whole thing falls apart.
Exactly. And good cloud policy and governance, that's what gives them the structure to actually collaborate well. Clear communication, everyone knowing their role, and everyone understanding the big picture.
So the policies themselves aren't enough. Everyone's got to be on the same page about how to actually use them.
And this is where you often see a change in the whole company culture. It's not about just telling people what to do anymore. It's more collaborative, more trust in the teams.
So instead of getting orders from on high, teams get the freedom to make decisions, but in a way that still fits the strategy.
Right. And that can be really motivating, you know? They can see how their choices directly impact the cloud costs, and that means they're impacting the bottom line.
It's about taking ownership, being accountable.
Exactly. And that brings up another crucial thing, measuring and reporting. You can have all these amazing policies and processes, but how do you know if they're actually working?
Yeah, that's the real test, isn't it? You can talk all day about saving money, but without the data, it's just talk.
Exactly. That's where KPIs come in, key performance indicators. They're the measurable things that tell you if you're on track with your FinOps goals.
So, like, what are some examples of KPIs that companies actually use for this?
One common one is cloud policy adherence. It's basically, are people actually following the rules? Say there's a policy that all the development environments have to be shut down outside of work hours. You can track how often that actually happens.
So you don't just make the rule, you have a way to see if it's being followed.
Right. And by watching this KPI over time, companies can see if all their hard work on cloud policy and governance is paying off.
What are some other KPIs, though?
Another important one is cost optimization rate. This one tells you how much of your cloud spending has actually been optimized because of your FinOps efforts. It shows how well you're using your cloud resources.
So, like, how much bang for your buck you're getting out of the cloud?
Exactly. And by looking at these KPIs regularly, really digging into the data, companies can spot trends in their cloud spending, see where to improve, and even prove that their FinOps efforts are actually worth it.
This is all super helpful, but it makes me think you need the right tools, the right people to handle all this data, right?
Absolutely. And that's why we're seeing more and more companies using these specialized FinOps platforms. Some are even outsourcing parts of it to managed service providers.
So it's becoming its own specialty within the whole cloud computing world.
For sure. And as companies keep pouring money into the cloud, those FinOps skills are only going to be more in demand.
Good to know for anyone looking to break into that world. But let's get a little more down to earth for a sec. We've been talking big picture, but how does all this apply on a smaller scale?
You know, it's funny. Personal finance is a good comparison. Just like these big companies, people have to manage their own money well.
It's all about smart choices, right? No matter if it's cloud servers or the cash in your wallet.
Right, all those things we talked about. Setting goals, tracking your spending, finding ways to optimize, they all apply to our own lives too.
So even if you're not managing millions in the cloud, these ideas about cloud policy and governance can still be really useful.
Totally. And a lot of the tools and tricks FinOps pros use can be adapted for personal use. There are tons of budgeting apps out there that help you track spending, see where you can save, that kind of thing.
So it's all about those core principles, being responsible with your money and using them in a way that makes sense for you.
And just like companies benefit from having a clear plan for the cloud, people benefit from having a clear plan for their money. Setting financial goals, making a budget that matches those goals, and tracking your progress.
So it's about taking control, right? Just like cloud policy and governance helps companies take control of their cloud spending.
And you get similar benefits, less stress, more financial security, and the freedom to go after your goals without worrying so much.
This has been super insightful, but before we go, I wanted to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about the growing demand for people with FinOps skills. What would you say to someone interested in a career in that space?
It's a really great time to get into FinOps. There are tons of jobs, and the field's changing all the time, which keeps things interesting. If you want to get started, I'd say learn the ins and outs of cloud technologies, get familiar with the different FinOps tools out there, and make sure you've got those analytical and communication skills down pat.
Those are good skills to have no matter what.
Right.
Not just for FinOps, but anything involving data, problem solving, working with others.
Absolutely. And I think that's an important takeaway from all of this. We've been talking about cloud policy and governance, but a lot of these ideas apply to business and tech in general.
Thinking strategically, making decisions based on data, and working together to reach a common goal. It really does feel like those FinOps skills go beyond just the technical stuff. You need that head for business, too.
Yeah, you got to see the big picture.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into cloud policy and governance, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from all of this?
I'd say, remember that cloud policy and governance, it's not just about pinching pennies, you know? It's about making sure your cloud spending actually lines up with what your business is trying to achieve and
Mhm.
giving your teams the power to innovate and really do their best work.
Making sure every dollar spent in the cloud is actually pushing the business forward.
Exactly. And that's something to aim for no matter how big or small your company is.
Well said. And if anyone wants to dive even deeper, check out the show notes. We've got some awesome FinOps resources linked there.
This was great. Always love these deep dives.
Me too. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep those cloud costs under control.
And don't forget, a well-managed cloud is a happy cloud.
And on that note, that's a wrap on this episode of The Deep Dive. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.